What's up, guys? My name is Ben. I have a main channel called YE Church Online. I have a business and ministry that I'm basically a startup for both ministry and business. So I've been on YouTube since 2016 ish or so. Just that is where kind of my main channel is, Washi, which just basically stands for Washington Yahweh Everywhere, because I live in the state of Washington, near Seattle. Anyway, um, I have a library of videos on my other channel, YE Church Online. So if you're looking for any videos that you want to get my perspective on certain topics, a lot of it is sort of a encouragement style video, kind of for your everyday listener. But then I do address certain topics or questions sometimes, but a lot of it is kind of a word of encouragement. But there's different types of videos, marriage videos, relationship videos, end time videos, and so check those out if you want to get my perspective on certain topics. I currently am basically in the process of completing my BA in um, in ministry. I do currently have an advanced certificate in the New Testament. I do feel proud about that one because it did take me a while, but by God's grace, when you start hitting your 30s, and if you haven't done certain things in your 20s, it is kind of true that it sometimes gets harder and harder to do things, like you once could have. But anyway, um, I definitely try to study up on certain things that I will give my perspective on. Obviously, the Bible does declare that the Holy Spirit teaches us all things, and so um, if anything, it could just be an enjoyable video to watch, and you can allow the Holy Spirit to teach you what you need to be taught, even if I may say the wrong thing or maybe just have a kind of a skewed perspective than what you may have. You can still sort of get something from the videos, I think. So definitely check out some of my videos on YE Church Online or even on this channel. And so these are kind of, I'm trying to plug in my laptop here, guys. So these are kind of my longer form videos. One of the things that since the discovery of AI, I know it's been out for a number of years, a little bit, but it's definitely been improving. And so I started to use AI lately on both YE Church Online and this channel. And so, you know, AI is great because it takes a lot of information from various sources. I think most of them probably online sources, but um, different sources that kind of gives you a summary, a computerized summary that is pretty accurate on whatever topic or question that you may have. And so I think some of the videos that have been coming out with that I've been posting on my channels um, are pretty interesting as far as the AI perspective. And so definitely check out those AI videos that I have. I think going forward, like I've been saying in some of my past videos on this channel and on the other channel, is that my goal is to get more professional with this YouTube channel, guys. Um, I definitely want to have a dedicated studio space. I know one thing, if you look back at most of my videos, you will see the background change, quite frequently. Um, Maybe not every video, but it definitely does change. And so it would be great to have a dedicated studio, but also, really taking this ministry to a more mature level. Um, it would be great to kind of change some of the either topics of the videos or the types of videos. I don't know if anyone watching this is familiar with my other YouTube channel, but just in case you aren't, I have done like different style Christian videos. So some of them have been like cooking with the Bible. So it's like, a cooking show, but like a Christian perspective on it. My wife has done her cooking, videos on there. Sometimes it's a vlog style video. So I might be, kind of giving you a glimpse into kind of like my perspective of things. Um, I also am interested in doing like a travel channel style video. And that again would be on all, as a plan at least, mostly on the YE Church Online YouTube channel, and then different little videos probably, speckled in here or there. um and so anyway, my main website, guys, is washi.com. On that website, there's a bunch of different information on, how to become a Christian, or you know different life advice that I can give, as far as like my perspective on things. And sorry about the light changes here, guys, um, if you see the camera changing. But anyway, check out the website. There'll be links in the description, hopefully, to both the other channel and the website. So anyway, that was a 7-minute introduction there. But one of the things I wanted to make this kind of an interesting little topic video. Uh, Again, some of my channels, I know this is kind of shunned on, but I do kind of prefer what they call long form videos. So when I post my videos, guys, I don't like to always give all the information in like 5 minutes or less, especially with some of the topics that I'm covering. Some of these things do require a little bit more of an explanation, especially, for those in this community, and especially those within the Christian community or pursuing Christianity. You know, some of these things you do benefit from having a little bit more explanation to the videos. Now, I know the YouTube community, as far as YouTube culture, yeah, there's maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on like shorter videos, or these really quick informational videos. But Jesus said, "Do unto others what you would have them do to you." So for my style, at least, I do prefer like kind of a longer explanation when it comes to certain types of videos. And so that's why these videos that you see with me, kind of just a straight talk form video, are a little bit longer generally. But I do have kind of a shorter AI style videos that I've been posting, guys. Some of those are as short as like 30 seconds. Anything that I can come up with, usually in like 30 seconds or a minute, usually isn't that like packed in with information, guys. So AI does a good job at like really shortening and like giving you the condensed necessary information in like a short little video. So that's why I like those. um but for today's topic, guys, thank you so much. Hit the like and subscribe button for anyone new. But I wanted to talk about on this channel. I really wanted to post this on my other channel, in kind of a more professional style, but I'm in between cameras as well, guys. But this question that we can sort of have, is, what religion is right or wrong, or maybe the question could be, you know, maybe for some it could be, is there a God or is there not a God? Or the question could be, you know, not necessarily is there a God, but, uh, the God that they may believe in, what are his attributes? What are his characteristics? And is the God of the universe the God of the Bible? And so that's one of the titles that I think I might go for this video, guys. Because one of the things that you realize when thinking about, the things that we don't necessarily have control over is like where we're born, like what race we are, what time we're born, so to speak, like what year, like, are you born 2,000 years ago or born here in, excuse me, in this present time? Or there's so many things that we don't necessarily have a, conscious control over, so to speak. And so, you know, when thinking about some of these bigger questions, you know, is there truth to say, is the God of the universe the God of the Bible? Now, there is kind of a different topic style that we could go with this, as far as maybe for those people that are kind of asking a different question of, whether they want to believe in God, or, they're kind of wrestling with the belief of God. I may not necessarily address that directly in this video. I was really trying to do a perspective video on, is from a belief standpoint of, is the God of the universe the God of the Bible? Or one of the ways that I've been sort of kind of asking this in my head is the God of the universe Christian, or is he Jewish? Like, does he practice, this thing himself? And so there's a lot of, mind blowing things that we could totally make videos on and talk about, because there's like so much, to get different perspectives on. That's one cool thing about YouTube, is that, even though, and especially the Christian channels too, is that even though you sometimes may see a repetitive kind of nature to, Christianity or the Bible, and different things like that, there are new perspectives that do come out about, some of the topics that we may have already studied. But also, there are some people that may kind of have this totally blind faith mentality, and, maybe they can sort of, you know have this easier time believing in a God or a higher power. But maybe in whatever way, they have not necessarily acknowledged that the God or their higher power or whatever, that they're utilizing to, you know say that there's a, a creator, you know they may not have made the connection, that this creator, this higher being, is the God of the Bible. And so I wanted to kind of give some perspective on this. I think, I did see some other Christian YouTube channels kind of do this type of video too. They might word it different, because in general, this is kind of asking, is there a God, and is he, the God of the Bible? Some YouTube channels may word their videos like that. And so, if you do want to see another person's perspective on this type of topic, I do recommend searching, the Christian perspective on, is there a God? And so, but, in particular, is after we've graduated from a belief in a creator versus maybe your Big Bang Theory, or, kind of some sort of natural natural approach to life. Um, honing in on some of the specifics, and especially the claims, or the contents of the Bible. Because one of the reasons why this video I think is an important video, and especially one to kind of drag out, maybe a little bit, like 20-30 minute video to take your time on, is because the Bible actually has some consequences for not doing what we're doing right now, is honing in on the God of the universe being the same God that gave us the Bible, and gave us his son Jesus Christ, and all that's wrapped up in you know biblical Christianity. Because again, depending on who you talk to, I've talked to a few different people, got some different perspectives. Now, I kind of already had a good sense of it when seeing other interviews on like street preachers asking random people kind of some life questions and stuff like that. And so there are some people, I think, at least from just their initial conversation, that can sort of have a mindset that, you know, um, they are sort of in denial that the God of the universe is Christian. But they may not necessarily be in complete denial of a creator. And so, yeah, there's kind of a different kind of perspective on that. I know the Bible does declare, though, that people can sort of have a mindset that of a natural kind of standpoint, where they're like, hey, I'm here, I exist, but, I kind of don't, ask too many questions about where we started or anything. I'm just sort of living my life on, and however way I want to live it. And so that is kind of a perspective that people can have too. And so, I don't know if I'm going to address that either too much in this perspective, but definitely from the perspective of those that do kind of need you know that extra help to get to the point of kind of changing their life even more. Because it's probably decent enough to think that in general, some of the people that do kind of at least have faith, but they may not necessarily have that Christian faith, but they do kind of have the faith of, there is a creator, and so to speak. um, there still needs to be a good connection on, why we should be changing our ways, and really adhering to, both the Old, but now the New Testament and all that it asks us to do, and so, um, yeah, this is an important topic. And I have seen a shift in my behavior, guys, just from a shift in my thinking, or what the Bible or Jesus calls believing. And it's kind of crazy to think about, guys, but it sort of makes sense when you start making some of the connections about this world, guys, and God. For example, God spoke this world into existence, according to the Bible, right? And so it's interesting how, you know, um, Jesus equates salvation to something that happens in our like inner being, in our mindset. And of course, one could say that salvation is not necessarily only a thinking kind of mindset deal. But I'm just trying to paint the perspective of kind of the idea, the general initial idea of belief. Belief is all it takes, in Jesus Christ to really be saved. And so the simplicity of that, you know, kind of makes sense though when you take that biblical perspective of God, did all that we see in the universe from just his words, you know, and we know that also, at least from a human perspective, talking seems to be kind of like one of the less energy sides of our, kind of capabilities, I mean, I don't know. It seems like, we as human beings don't do anything necessarily as far as building or creation just by talking, And so God's on a completely different realm, And so it seems like we as human beings, we need our hands and feet to kind of do everything that we need to be done. And so, anyway, let's hone in on some, different kind of beliefs in regards to why you should believe that the God of the universe is Jewish or is Christian. You could have that perspective, or why the God of the universe, it does really adhere to the Bible, or another perspective or question is, you know, um, is the God of the Bible going to do what is written in the Bible? Is the God of the universe going to do what is written in the Bible? And so, this is a question that, many people, I think, can skim over. You know, I know for me, being born in a Christian home, um, you kind of are taught these things. But I think even for those of us that are kind of grew up in maybe the United States, or, there's good chance that if you were born in the United States, that you may have some sort of connection to someone that is kind of like a Christian, So now that, brings up a whole nother topic in video as far as, you know, uh, naming yourself as a Christian. I've had that revelation recently too. But even for those of us that kind of have this mentality of, oh, I've always been a Christian, I think we can benefit from, this too by kind of increasing our faith stance and our thankfulness to God, because, realizing, some people do sort of have a perspective. And I think even we as Christians can sometimes take on this perspective that Christianity is sort of just another religion. Um, or as maybe an unbeliever might say, Christianity is just a sort of lifestyle choice, another choice among choices, of how you want to kind of live your life. To some, it could be beneficial, to others, it's kind of a pain in the neck. And so, um, when you think about all the different lifestyle choices that are out there, and, the underlying kind of choices under those choices, and then you add up kind of some of the serious claims of the Bible, and especially the longevity of the Bible, guys, because, I think in this world, it's so easy to also adopt a temporary mindset, but God, especially when it comes to salvation, talks from an eternal perspective, guys. Like the decisions that we're making, maybe not every decision, but, especially when it comes to salvation, the decisions that people are making every day have eternal consequences. And that is why I think it's so important and serious to really ask the question for those of us that, do kind of have this faith that was given to us, where we're like, oh, I know there's a God. I can see it. It's here, but the evidence is here, so to speak. But yet, there could be those of us that really need that extra help. And so, one of the things that I've thought of is the nation of Israel, guys. I've heard this before, but actually, when you really think about it, guys, it's very interesting. So, one of the things, especially when fighting attacks from the enemy, guys, from Satan, you know, um, or just when you're fighting those doubts about your Christian walk with Jesus Christ and the God of the universe, one thing that has helped me kind of get through those little times is the existence of the nation of Israel, guys. And I think this also kind of adds to that perspective of why the biblical enemy of God wants to get rid of the nation of Israel is because of the strong witness that the nation of Israel's presence has to the claims of the Bible and to the further connection to the God of the universe and how he operates. So, in summary, for this little segment here, I think the existence of the nation of Israel is one way to kind of hone in on understanding that your belief in a creator needs to be honed in to a biblical worldview. And so, why? It just makes you wonder, why does the nation of Israel even exist, really? And especially when you hear about how hard it is for them to exist, and especially in the region of the world that they're in, and the coincidences that compound on the nation of Israel's presence and where they're at, you know, and just looking at the whole biblical message, guys, and then you start to doubt, because I don't know, of any other kind of too many other either religions or worldviews that kind of have that level of a big of a witness, as far as for someone that was born in the United States of America, in the 90s, um, and when you kind of grew up and you're looking back at history through the Bible, when you see that there is an actual nation of Israel that you can go to, you know, I think that really does change your perspective and simmers down the doubts that you can have. Now, again, this could be a little bit hard depending on your starting off worldview perspective. Because, for example, I think Islam, you know, uh, their religion has been around for a while with certain types of roots and stuff. And so, if your worldview kind of comes from that Muslim Islamic worldview, the existence of the nation of Israel may not be that impactful to you as far as changing some of your, maybe doubts or reasons of why the God of the universe is the God of the Bible. Because, you could say, well, hey, so the nation of Israel exists, and, we have the Bible, and the God of the universe claims to be the God of the biblical Israel, and, hey, they do actually exist here, and I guess a Muslim could kind of say that about their religion and their history, as far as when you look at some of the claims of, you know, the and I usually get this confused, like Islam or Muslim, because I think they're two different things. So no disrespect if I get it wrong, guys. Again, I'm only 33, guys. I'm still studying a lot right now, guys, And so please don't let that take away from at least you learning from this video in any way, shape, or form. But I'm talking about certain religions, may have those certain roots to them as well, as far as, the longevity of how long they've been around. And, because it does sort of help when you have others around you that believe the way that you believe, and so that's one of the powerful things of Christianity, is kind of the witness that, others can share in regards to their Christian perspective, and also the power of God that they've experienced in their life. Um, I think that's, an important kind of thing to realize, is that, a lot of people, just need to have a little bit more of, understanding. So that would be one thing. That was one thing that I was thinking of when I was thinking of kind of like what would I share when giving this, kind of video, would be the existence of the nation of Israel. But two, one of the perspectives I've had, and I think I did a video on this kind of, but is the existence of good and evil. Um, and this is very important because there are, I think, quite a number of people that can sometimes, one, deny the existence of evil on some level, but two, deny the impact of it, or really, um, you know, kind of the culture behind, good and evil. A lot of people can sort of have these skewed perspectives of it. And it is interesting that the Bible has a very holy, which means set apart, perspective on good and evil that I think a lot of people tend to, one, be offended at, but two, tend to overlook when thinking about kind of the uniqueness of the Christian faith and the connection to the God of the universe and the God of the Bible. Now, I think there's a lot to share, in regards to this, that I don't think we always got to leave room for you guys to, think of your own kind of thoughts too. So I don't want to share everything that I'm thinking right now, but, um, so for this point number two, as far as, um, point number one was the existence of the nation of Israel. Point number two is the existence of good and evil and the Bible's perspective on it. So I think this is a strong witness for the God of the universe being the God of the Bible, is that, when you read and hone in on what the Bible actually is saying in regards to good and evil, it really makes sense. And also, you know, um, has a very unique perspective, especially when you consider how the majority of the world lives. Now, obviously, this is from a, airplane perspective, right? Because, I have, traveled certain places, but you still don't see what everyone's personal life is like, right? But, even in general, guys, um, even the claims of the Bible add up in certain ways that you can just see even in our society, guys. For example, you know, um, just the pure acknowledgement of God, guys. Like, that is one thing that the Bible just wants us to do, is to just acknowledge God. Now, there is, kind of some definition to what it means to acknowledge God. But even just from a like general sense of acknowledging God, the definition of acknowledge, just like to make aware, to make his to become aware of his presence, basically. You're like, acknowledging his presence in your area, in your life, in the universe. That's kind of, the general meaning of acknowledging God. And the Bible clearly calls people out that they do not acknowledge God. And so even when you look in society, not even saying from a Christian perspective, guys, I'm just talking about from the whole idea of the existence of God, guys. We as a society, I'm talking about not even just America, guys, like the entire world shuns the idea of God. Now, okay, I get it. There's different religions that, you obviously, have people that have their religious belief of God and they worship and, go to, services and do different things and prayer. And I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm just talking about, in general, our society, our stores, our library, our school system. We do not acknowledge a God in general for the most part, guys. You know and when you really look at kind of like how we live and stuff, and I'm not necessarily even saying acknowledging the Christian God, the true God of the universe, right? And we're going to get into a little bit more about, why I'm saying that. But, there's a whole nother video too to really talk about how society, one, just does not like to talk about God or acknowledge God, right? But two, the complete neglect of the God of the Bible, for one. That is a whole nother issue when you really think about it. But, that's not necessarily what this video is focused on. Um, I'm just saying, um, when you look at the biblical perspective, that is, sinful, and so the Bible does call that out, that, not acknowledging your creator, even if it, wasn't the God of the Bible, is sort of, I mean, even common sense from the brain that we have, guys, it is sort of would be rude of any creation, to not acknowledge their creator. Imagine like you build a robot, guys, and like it just one day when it's able, it just walks out the door and never sees you again, and you never get any use of that robot or anything. It just walks out the door and lives autonomously. I mean, it's kind of funny, but like that is kind of like what people are doing with God when you think about it, And and I think that is one perspective that kind of does, I think for me definitely bring truth that the God of the universe is the God of the Bible, because of kind of the things that the Bible is saying society is like. And then when you look at history or when you look at our present society, it is like that. Now, again, I mentioned that some people do deny the existence of evil, or, certain evils or something like that. Especially in today's culture, some people don't necessarily believe everything that comes on the news, which is understandable. But I mean, even credible news stations or like credible news from different perspectives, people will deny that too. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard, I didn't really hear this until recently, that there are people that deny the whole Hitler Nazi thing. It's like, even in this present days, there are certain people, at least they claim to, out of the words of their mouth, they claim that, they don't believe that, Hitler ever did what he did. And so, a lot of this, that brings up another point, guys. There's so many things in this world, if not more than we realize, that are just built on faith that we use all the time, guys. For example, guys, I've never met this person called Bill Gates, right? But yet it is so easy for me to believe that he exists, even though I've never seen the guy, probably will never really see him ever in person, at least in the foreseeable future. And yet, I don't really have any problem believing that Bill Gates actually exists, guys. But yet, even today, yeah, if I didn't have the knowledge that the show The Chosen was like a history show or something, it's kind of the same perspective in regards to Jesus, guys. Like, we have all this evidence that he existed, or we have like all this kind of knowledge that, you know, um, what the disciples saw was true. And yet, so many people can go the route of denying, one, Jesus's existence, but two, denying what others saw Jesus do. And so, hopefully this video can kind of help kind of slow people down in thinking in regards to, taking a broader look at some of these things that we can kind of take for granted so easily, and especially those that, kind of already grew up in a religious home or a faith home or even a Christian home. It is good to kind of answer even questions for ourselves of why we believe what we believe, and why, you know it is um true. And so, another perspective, I think, point number three would probably, so point number one was, the nation of Israel existing. I think that is, such a good kind of evidence of why the God of the universe is the God of the Bible. And there's more to, I think, unravel when talking about the existence of the nation of Israel and why that is a connection between, believing in God. But that was point number one. And then point number two was, um, just the very existence of evil and good, and the connection that, the Bible makes and what it talks about in regards to evil and good, and the set apartness that the Bible has in regards to other lifestyle choices or ways of living, or other religions. Now, again, I grew up in the United States of America, so we do take kind of a, again, even though some people do kind of acknowledge that, America is a Christian nation, it's more of a Christian tolerant nation, not necessarily a Christian nation in the same perspective of, like, in the same way that like Israel is a Jewish nation, I guess. I don't know. Like, there's more kind of backing to that, I feel like, when talking about Israel as a Jewish nation, rather than, saying the United States is a Christian nation. But anyway, just the perspective that, point number two was the perspective that the Bible takes on good and evil, I think is, kind of another belief. Because here's, I think this is the point that I didn't finish before I wrap up number three too. Point number three was, um, you know, uh, what I was going to hone in on. But let me just, before I go to that, point number two. So, the very existence of good and evil, right? And we're like trying to make a connection between the God of the Bible and the God of the universe for those that kind of, can believe in a creator, just, maybe unsure, so to speak, of, kind of the truthfulness of the Bible. Well, when thinking about the perfection of God, guys, and like the all the other attributes that God has, one of the things that I kind of thought of was, you know, how God in his infinite knowledge boils down so simply, what he tells us, especially in the New Testament. It's sort of, if God knows everything, why would God be evil? You know, um, I don't know. I think this is kind of getting into a realm that's hard for us to understand. But, just thinking about a supernatural being that knows everything, that, has lived for all of eternity, has always existed, and now we exist with him, you know, and then making the connection between God and the Bible, the level of kind of um, sort of, I guess you could put it in the perspective of quality of life, so to speak, that the Bible sort of gives us a standard for, I think is, like the word we've been hearing a lot, unprecedented. You know, I think the Bible is totally unique in that. Why do we struggle with some of these things that the Bible says that we struggle with? You know, why is there such a thing as sexual immorality? Why does it hurt if your spouse cheats on you or commits adultery on you? And the Bible also introduces us to the term adultery and the meaning behind that. Now, obviously, I guess, I don't know. I feel like murder is one of those things that it's kind of like, maybe it doesn't always take the Bible to understand that that's wrong. But for some people, yeah, too, it could. But also, there's a little bit of these other kind of sinful things that it does take the Bible to really understand it is wrong, you know, and especially for those people that like, kind of the science behind stuff and the scientific method and stuff. I do believe that, there is a connection between um, certain laws of physics and, kind of the sinful choices and lifestyles that people can live in that just do not add up or make sense in this world, in our existence, that the Bible calls us out on. It doesn't have to be sexual. I mean, it could be, kind of like stealing. Why is stealing wrong, and why does the Bible call it out? Because we understand, the feeling that we get when you have something that you are either, in need of or, you value, and when it gets taken against your will, kind of the perspective of how that makes a person feel. And so the Bible calls us out of darkness into the light. It calls us out of these poor choices of living, you know, um, and especially in regards to the laws of physics that God has created around us. Some of this stuff adds up in the Bible. If and I believe all of it adds up, but I'm just saying, kind of in a way, you know, when you think about the perfection of God, you know, some of this is kind of hard, to understand for sure. As far as like, well, I mean, there's more to not understand for sure, but you know, some of this stuff I think, really takes a focused eye to really see how we should not want to waste our life, pursuing these other lifestyles or other ways of life, or religions that ultimately the Bible claims, leads us to eternal death. And so because of the huge claim that I think, I do have to do some research on, I think this could probably be a good AI video on what other religions say about not necessarily the afterlife, but the consequence of not following their lifestyle or religion or whatever. I heard, from another pastor, I mean, from another minister, excuse me, I'm not a pastor necessarily, but another minister saying that, other religions don't necessarily talk about a place worse than this place called hell or the lake of fire. Like the Bible is pretty much exclusive on that type of kind of negative outcome on your afterlife, And so, um, I mean, when you look at the specifics of the Bible, guys, I mean, why do people live only under 120 years, just like the Bible says, guys? Like, I don't know of any religious text that gives us a number that, so clearly defines how long a human being can live, and no one has outlived 120 years. Now, yeah, you may see some fake news, or I think it's fake news of, people like 125 or 130. Usually they're like, you know, in the mountains somewhere far away, like with no verifiable record or anything like that. It's always some sketchy situation, which again, you have to take by faith, right? And I think hopefully it was this video that I mentioned that a lot of things are built on faith that we don't even realize in this world. And so there's just these little claims of the Bible that, we have to really take notice of, because, you don't want to find out that the God of the universe is the God of the Bible and you went the wrong way. And not only did you go the wrong way, but, God literally, has, as the Bible says, you know, um, nothing more that he can do for you after you die and you've gone the wrong way, because the Bible does also claim that everyone has the right or understanding to be saved. If you're born into this world, in general, I believe that's what the Bible talks about, like, now there are some people, I think they are in the group called Calvinist, that sort of have this extreme, what we call predestination, which means that, you know, um, some people are chosen over others to have eternal life or something like that. I do give my perspective on that. I think I make one or two videos on that. I don't know, how you would find them. That's kind of the downside of my library of videos on YouTube, is I don't necessarily have them all organized. Maybe I can hire someone to do that in the future, of like, hey, will you organize my videos? Or maybe AI, maybe they'll add a feature or something to automatically organize your YouTube videos or something. But anyway, I my short answer to that, even though I'm really going off track here, but because I wanted to get to point number 3, but um, from God's perspective, since He does know everything, then yes, in a way, I guess you could say that He knows who's going to be saved and who's going to be lost, irregardless of, you know uh our perspective on it, so to speak. Like, from our perspective, since we're finite, to us it is like we're sort of making a choice for salvation or something like that. But to God, He already knows everything. And so even though He created some beings, He had the knowledge that they would never choose eternal life. And so he made them, even though he knew that they would never live right or, do anything that God asked them to do. And so, yes, I do believe even that when talking about point number two, the existence of evil, that in of itself points to a good characteristic of God to bring someone into creation that does not deserve to exist, so to speak, is showing the loving characteristics of God, the grace characteristics of God that adds up in the Bible, guys. I mean, when you think about it, it is sort of better to get a chance to exist, even though you were evil or good, rather than to not ever see this existence at all and to just be in nothingness. Obviously, to you, you know, it wouldn't matter, but I guess to God, he has a problem with that. Like, he wanted to make people and give them all a chance to experience existence, even though he knew that, for example, like the demons or something, they would never do the right thing. Their choices in life cause them to go in a bad direction. But I totally agree with the perspective that God did not necessarily influence them to make those sinful choices. So, I'm still studying this myself, guys, but it makes sense when you make the connection between the characteristics of God and the power of God, that it is possible for God to create a completely separate being that has its own choices and will. Just like we can create a robot that, eventually will sort of make its own choices autonomously, even though they're sort of based on the software or infrastructure that we initially gave it, right? And so, I mean, I'm pretty sure the Bible says that creation, tells of God's glory, and tells of who God is, right? And so maybe we are seeing AI and robotics just as another perspective and witness to our creator who made us, and he has allowed us to even make something similar to us, human beings, which we call AI or a robot. And so, all of this is very interesting, guys. And let me skip to point number three. Hopefully, it didn't leave my brain here. I was going to give what was the third perspective was, you know, the claims of the Bible. I should really write this down, guys. A lot of my videos, I do, honest, just kind of talk, you know, after I've studied and stuff, guys. Maybe I'll study like during the day or something, and then I will just sort of, talk without a script. Now, I know some people like using scripts, guys. Um, to me, for now, because, I do have kind of a few different things going on, not necessarily a super busy life, guys, but I think for me, it's just better to not necessarily use a script here, guys. So sometimes I do just kind of, study and then give you my perspective on certain topics. So it's unscripted. So I may sort of forget something, guys, that I was meaning to say, but I didn't quite say it. But hopefully, in general, this gets you a good perspective on, making the connection between the God of the universe and the God of the Bible. But there are some other points that I think are worth mentioning. And I really wanted to say, like, kind of your afterlife perspective. I think I've really already mentioned it, how the Bible is sort of unique in its opinion about the human race and how we live our life, guys. But also, I think there's so many different good little perspectives to hear of why certain people have come to faith in Jesus Christ. Um, because there is a lot of evidence just in the natural world, of God's goodness. As oh, sorry guys, I just need to stretch real quick. Um, when you make the connection, especially between the beauty of Earth could be a reflection of God's character, of the beauty of God, and how he has all these wonderful characteristics. Yes, the Bible does sometimes talk about like the weakness of God, so to speak, but it's still stronger than man, the Bible says. So God is completely, one complete, but also he is a not a human being, he's not a man or a woman, you know, he's not like any of his creation. So, I mean, that just because he said he's not a human being, that means he's also not an animal, guys. The Bible addresses this in the book of Deuteronomy. I believe it's the book of Deuteronomy, or it could be Exodus, where God says, basically in the form when he corrects us about idols, he says, don't bow down to the moon or the sun or the stars because he is not those things. He says, do not make an idol of an animal, of anything in the sea or the sky or on land, because he is not an animal either. And so, when you really start thinking about who God is, it really does blow your mind as far as like, really making the connection between your choices in life, because again, going back to the huge kind of important claim of the Bible is that your rejection of Jesus Christ has, bigger consequences than you may not be fully willing to acknowledge. Now, I do believe that, there is, the truth of, sort of people just, go to hell on their own, so to speak. And I think there is some truth to that because, when Jesus did ask the um, crippled man, he said, "Do you want to get well?" You know, and it is an interesting question that Jesus asked. I remember, maybe one of the first times either hearing or reading that passage, not I don't think I fully understood sometimes of why, at least compared to how I think about it now, why Jesus asked him that question. But after, seeing a few more people, talking to a few more people, there is a sort of a mindset that you can have where you're sort of content of where you're at and you're refusing to change. And I think that can be, kind of detrimental, especially in some negative categories. If you're in heavy sinful lifestyle choices and you're sort of content, with who you are, you don't feel shame, and then you somehow stand before this God of the universe to give an account for your life, you know, there is just some epic proportions that, we have to really discuss. And so that's why, sometimes when evangelizing, guys, I'm not like a Billy Graham of evangelizing, I don't say I always do evangelism completely right either, guys. I know, but still, I try to tell people like we need to research. We need to do a lot of research in regards to what we believe. And I think there's so many people that sort of go through life and, they're not necessarily reaching out for God, trying to find their way to God. They're trying to find their way to different parts of His creation or different experiences in His creation, but not necessarily going to the source of creation. And even we as Christians are still learning, to do this better and better, guys. I totally agree that, like a lot of other Christians say, is that, this is kind of a growth experience journey with God. Is that, sometimes we don't always have the right mindset. We don't always say the right thing or do the right thing. Even once we do come to Christ, guys, we still do have things that we need to overcome. Even though sometimes, even as Christians, we can sort of say, oh, yeah, I gave my life to Christ and, now I'm perfect, and I don't think the Bible really adheres to that either, even though that would be great, in the short term. But anyway, I always try to tell people that, I do think a great movie, The Case for Christ, has a good perspective on, the impact of really researching some of the things that you can believe just so easily, you know. And a lot of people, it's kind of interesting, you hear certain people say this sometimes. Like, it's so weird, some of the things that people hear and then people say, and then, when you think about making the connection of, that to a biblical perspective, there's some interesting things that people kind of adhere to um, in their lifestyle and thinking that, you know, um, it's just, troubling, And so, anyway, guys, I'm on a journey to, be a better Christian man. You know, one of the things I realize is that, even after you come to Jesus or call on Jesus, you know, even though He said, His yoke is easy and His burden is light, there is still a yoke and a burden. Even though He didn't say like they don't exist anymore, He's just saying that it's lighter. Which, what I'm trying to say is, there's still work for us to do, even on ourselves as Christians. And lately I've really realized the importance of, trying to strive to even, do the things that God is asking us to do in a better way, trying to please God and, trying to really live the Christian life. And hopefully, I really wanted to, maybe I'll do an AI video kind of connected to this video, guys. Because I know AI can kind of give a lot more examples than what I just gave in this video. But it's already been an hour long, so I think I only gave like 2 to 3 examples or so of why you should believe that the God of the universe is the God of the same God of the Bible. Um, so sorry, I didn't get into all the points that I wanted to, but I do want to kind of keep this super short for those that kind of stick to it and watch. I don't want them to like, oh, this is like a 3 hour video. So yeah, thank you so much for those that did watch and gave this time. Hey, if you're looking to become a Christian, and really serve the God of the universe, we do believe that we are the only group that is really acknowledging the true God, and He is offering us salvation, and to really understand what that really means. You can get my perspective on that, but I also recommend doing even more research on different Christians and I highly recommend the big names too, like Billy Graham. I think he, has a very exceptional ministry that you can learn, pretty much everything you need to know from his ministry alone. But then, there's a lot of good other ministries out there that you can, get greater understanding. But you can go to my website, washye.com, WASHYE.com, for more information. Again, I'm in the process of, changing studio space, guys, to changing camera. I know this is a little bit of a different resolution that I'm used to. I usually shoot on an iPhone, guys, and it comes out a lot more clear. But in general, most of my videos are kind of like this talking style, guys. And so I do want to be able to make more professional looking videos. But also, there's a lot more things that YE Company is looking to do, YE Ministries is looking to do, and even this YouTube channel is looking to do, guys. And so I do believe I can pull off a lot of, if not all, especially in eternity, but even on this side of heaven, I do believe I want to be a reputable ministry and business that you can go to aid in your Christian living and also to help evangelize to those that aren't Christians. So, anyway, if you want to join this community, join me in my walk with God, and help out this ministry in any way, you can go to my website. And so, thanks so much, guys. Also, if you're looking for more videos from me, I have over 2,000 videos on my other channel, YE Church Online. And if for whatever reason, I would recommend going to that channel. That's probably where I'm going to do most of my uploads. This is kind of my secondary channel right now, guys. And so, thanks so much, and talk to you next time. See ya.